Everything you associate with civilization, cities, laws, governments, armies, writing, art, religion in its organized form, rests on a single invention: farming. The controlled cultivation of plants and animals that began roughly 12,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent and spread outward across the world. Before that invention, for the vast majority of human existence, humans lived an entirely different way. And that way of life was not what most people imagine. The word that most people reach for when they think about pre-farming humans is primitive, but the evidence tells a different story. For at least 300,000 years, and probably longer, anatomically modern humans lived as hunter-gatherers. They moved, they foraged, they hunted, they tracked, they observed the natural world with a precision and depth that most modern people cannot approach. And according to a growing body of anthropological research, many of them were healthier, worked fewer hours, and spent more time in social and creative activity than the farmers who came after them. This is not a romantic fantasy. It is a finding that comes from the bones. Bioarchaeologist Clark Spencer Larson at Ohio State University has spent decades comparing skeletal remains from pre-agricultural and post-agricultural populations, and the picture that emerges is striking. When populations transitioned from hunting and gathering to farming, their average stature dropped, their teeth showed more decay and infection, their bones showed more evidence of repetitive stress injury, their infant mortality rose. The biological cost of farming, of switching from a varied diet of wild plants and animals to a narrower diet based on a few cultivated crops, was paid in human bodies. Hunter-gatherers ate differently than we do today, and differently than early farmers. Their diet was extraordinary in its variety. Depending on the region and season, it might include dozens of species of wild plants, roots, tubers, seeds, nuts, berries, fruit, leaves, fungi, honey, insects, fish, shellfish, birds, and game animals, ranging from small to very large. This dietary breadth meant that no single crop failure could destroy the food supply. It meant exposure to a wide range of micronutrients. It meant a relationship with food that was embedded in a deep knowledge of the local landscape. Anthropologist Richard Lee, who spent years living among the Juhonsi San people of the Kalahari in the 1960s, made a finding that upended decades of assumptions. The Juhonsi, living in one of the more challenging environments on Earth, worked on average about 15 to 20 hours per week to meet their subsistence needs, not 15 to 20 hours a day, per week. The rest of their time was spent sleeping, talking, visiting, making things, playing, and engaging in the rich social and ceremonial life of the group. Economist Marshall Solins took Lee's data and the findings of similar studies and proposed what he called the original affluent society. His argument was precise and counterintuitive. Hunter-gatherers were not poor people struggling to survive. They were people who had calibrated their needs to match what the environment could reliably provide, and who therefore had, in the most meaningful sense, enough. Not material abundance, but sufficiency. And with sufficiency came time, and time is the most fundamental form of wealth. This is not to say that life before farming was easy. It was not. Illness was real. Injury was common and often fatal without treatment. Childbirth was dangerous. Predators were a genuine concern in many environments. Droughts, cold seasons, and failures of local food sources could cause genuine hunger. Infant mortality was high. Average lifespan was shorter, not because the body aged faster, but because the hazards of life were more immediate and more lethal. But within those constraints, the evidence suggests that pre-farming humans were not living in the constant, desperate struggle for survival that popular imagination has always assumed. They were living in small, mobile groups of roughly 20 to 50 people with deep knowledge of a specific landscape, complex social relationships, rich traditions of story and music and art, and enough daily time to invest in all of it. Those small groups were not isolated. Archaeological evidence and genetic studies show that ancient hunter-gatherer bands maintained long-distance networks of exchange and social contact with other groups. Shells found hundreds of kilometers from the coast, ochre pigments traded across enormous distances, obsidian from specific volcanic sources appearing at sites far from any volcano. These were not people living in isolation. They were people living in networks. with trade routes and social relationships that spanned landscapes. The social structure within groups was also far more egalitarian than most people assume. Anthropologist Christopher Boehm, at the University of Southern California, who has studied the social organization of hunter-gatherer societies extensively, found that most such societies were actively and deliberately egalitarian, not passive, not accidentally equal, but actively organized to prevent the accumulation of power by any single individual. When someone showed signs of trying to dominate the group, other members would mock them, criticize them, disobey them, or in extreme cases, ostracize them. Boehm calls this reverse dominance hierarchy. The group collectively held power over any individual who tried to take too much of it. This has significant implications for understanding human nature. For most of human existence, the social environment actively selected against domineering, status-obsessed personalities, and in favor of individuals who were generous, cooperative, skilled, and socially skilled. The traits we associate today with leadership, vision, decisiveness, the accumulation of followers, were not necessarily advantageous in the environment in which the human character was shaped. The art is perhaps the most striking evidence of all. Cave paintings at Lascaux in France, at Altamira in Spain, at Chauvet dating back more than 30,000 years, and at sites in Indonesia dating back further still, reveal a visual sophistication, an aesthetic ambition, and a technical skill that cannot be dismissed as crude beginnings. These are not attempts at art, these are art. The animals depicted at Chauvet are rendered with an understanding of movement, of perspective, of anatomical form, that professional artists today find astonishing. Whoever made these images was not struggling to survive at the edge of capacity. They had enough cognitive bandwidth, enough time, and enough motivation to create work of extraordinary beauty for reasons that had nothing to do with finding food. Music was there too. Bone flutes, found at sites across Europe, dating back more than 40,000 years, reveal that music was not a late cultural development. It was present at the beginning of everything we can find evidence of. So who were these people, really? They were not the grunting, club-wielding caricatures that popular culture invented. They were people who moved through landscapes they knew intimately, who ate better than most people in the modern world, who worked shorter weeks than their descendants would for the next 10,000 years, who made art and music and maintained complex social networks across hundreds of kilometers, who organized their societies to prevent the concentration of power, and who did all of this without writing it down, without cities, without governments, and without the thing that is usually taken to be the beginning of everything. Farming changed everything. But the people who lived before it were not waiting to be civilized. They were already doing something extraordinary with the one resource that farming would eventually take away from most of the people who came after them: time.